My name is Riley Miller. I'm 32 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas. 3 days before my wedding, his parents threw a gold-embossed prenup across their marble dining table. It didn't slide. It landed with a dull, final slap. That sound told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't going to be family. I was a threat. "It's just a formality, dear," his mother, Catherine, said. She was smirking, her eyes cold and triumphant. His father leaned back, looking bored, as if I were just a minor business detail to be handled. They saw me as a girl from nowhere, a liability to be managed. And Daniel, my fiancé, the man I loved, he just stared at his polished shoes, silent. They thought I was marrying into their money. They thought I was cornered. They didn't know money was already mine. They called it a formality. I called it an insult. I looked at the pages designed to leave me with nothing. Then I looked up, met their arrogant eyes, and gave them a small, quiet smile. They called it just a formality. I called my lawyer. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment, where are you watching from? I met Daniel Harrison 4 years ago. It was at a charity gala for a cause I truly believed in, but at an event I could barely stand. The event was held at the Austin Museum of Art. The noise was the first thing you noticed. It was a loud, sharp echo of hundreds of people talking but saying nothing. Their laughter was high and tight. It wasn't real laughter. It was the sound people make when they want to be seen. I've been to many of these events. I'm Riley Miller. I'm an investor. I started my own tech company 8 years ago, a small data-driven design firm. I sold it last year. I did very well. But I don't look like old money. I wear simple, clean-cut clothes. I drive a reliable car. I live in a house that is comfortable, not a palace. These galas are part of the job. You go, you shake hands, you write a check, and you remind the city's power players that you exist. That night, I was standing near a large, abstract painting, trying to look interested in it. In reality, I was just counting the minutes until I could politely leave. "It's terrible, isn't it?" a voice said next to me. I turned. It was Daniel. I had never seen him before, but he looked like he belonged there more than the painting did. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo. His hair was artfully messy. He had the kind of easy, reckless smile that could disarm a room. He was magnetic. "I'm not sure terrible is the word I'd use," I said. "What word would you use?" He smiled, taking a sip of his champagne. "Expensive? Pointless? A good tax write-off for the person who donated it?" I couldn't help but smile. "All of the above. I'm Daniel," he said, holding out his hand. "Riley," I said, shaking it. We started talking. It was easy. He wasn't like the other men in that room. They were all stiff, older, and smelled like cigars and entitlement. They talked about stocks, about boats, about their golf games. Daniel talked about the terrible music. He talked about a hiking trip he wanted to take. He asked me what I did, and when I told him I ran a design firm, he seemed genuinely interested. He didn't ask how much it made. He asked what we designed. "It must be nice," he said, looking around the room, "to actually make something, instead of just being something." That line stuck with me. We spent the rest of the night in that corner, creating our own little bubble away from the noise. He was funny. He was sharp. And he seemed completely unimpressed by the wealth surrounding us. He told me his family was in investments, but he brushed it off. "I don't care about money," he said. He leaned in, and his voice was low and sincere. "It's just paper. It's a trap. People spend their whole lives chasing it, and they forget to live." I believed him. I believed him because I wanted to. My life had been about work. It had been a slow, hard climb. I built my company from my tiny apartment. I worked 80-hour weeks. I watched every penny. I had seen what money did to people. It made them greedy, or it made them lazy. Daniel seemed different. He seemed like a man who had seen all the money in the world and decided he wanted something real instead. I should have asked him whose money he didn't care about. Our first few dates were perfect. He took me to a small Italian restaurant he knew, not the expensive, trendy places. We went for a walk by the lake. He listened to me. He remembered the names of my team members. He celebrated when I landed a big contract. He was supportive. He was attentive. He was everything I had been missing. When he told me he loved me 6 months later, under the stars at a quiet park, I felt a kind of peace I had never known. I thought, this is it. This is real. I let him into my life. I let him into my home. I let my guard down. I showed him my world, the one I had built with my own 2 hands. He seemed to love it. He loved that I was driven. He loved that I was independent, or so I thought. Looking back, the illusion was so carefully built. He was the perfect romantic man who was above the shallow world he came from. He was the exception, but an illusion is still a lie. And the bigger the illusion, the harder it shatters. The cracks always start small. You ignore them at first. You paint over them. You tell yourself it's just the house settling. But the house was a lie too. And the cracks weren't in the walls. They were in the foundation. The first time I met his parents, I knew something was wrong. Daniel had been putting off the meeting for almost a year. It was always something. They're traveling. My father is in the middle of a big deal. My mother is fragile right now. Finally, after we moved in together, into a beautiful condo he said he owned downtown, he couldn't put it off any longer. Let's just do it, I said one night. A simple dinner. I want to know them. He looked nervous, but he agreed. Okay, Friday night. At their estate. The word estate should have been a warning. I drove us. Daniel was quiet the whole way, tapping his fingers on his knee. We pulled up to a massive set of iron gates. They slid open slowly, revealing a long, winding driveway. The house wasn't a house. It was a monument. It was all white stone and towering pillars, surrounded by gardens so perfect they looked fake. This is a lot, Daniel, I said, my voice barely a whisper. It's just a house, Riles, he said, but his voice was strained. We walked into a foyer so large it echoed. The floor was polished white marble, the kind that shows every reflection. A woman was waiting at the top of a sweeping staircase. She was tall, painfully thin, and wore a simple silk dress that I knew cost more than my first car. Her hair was perfect. Her diamonds were real. This was Catherine Harrison. Daniel, you're late, she said. Her voice was like ice. Sorry, Mother. Traffic. This is Riley. Catherine's eyes swept over me. She didn't look at me. She looked through me. She assessed my simple black dress, my minimal jewelry. I saw her mind calculating my worth. And I saw the final sum, 0. Hello, I said, holding out my hand. She ignored it. She just turned and glided down the hall. Arthur is in the study. Dinner is in 30 minutes. Daniel gave me a weak, apologetic smile and motioned for me to follow. The dinner was awful. It was in a dining room that could have seated 40 people. There were only 4 of us. The table was so long we had to raise our voices to be heard. Arthur, his father, was a carbon copy of Daniel, just 30 years older and harder. He had a look of permanent mild disappointment. He spent the first 10 minutes grilling me. Not in a getting-to-know-you way. It was an interrogation. So, Riley, he said, cutting into his steak, what does your family do? My father was an engineer, I said. My mother was a teacher. They're retired now, living in Arizona. Arthur nodded slowly, as if I'd just confessed to a crime. I see. No family business, then. My business is my business, I said, keeping my voice polite. I started my own firm. A design firm, Catherine said, tasting the words like they were sour. How lovely. Is that like decorating? We specialize in user interface and data analytics, I said. They both just stared at me. And Daniel, Arthur said, turning to his son, tells us you're quite successful at it. I do well, I said. The rest of the dinner went like that. Catherine never once said my name. When she wanted my attention, she would say to Daniel, ask the girl if she'd like more wine. Or she would say to the server, make sure the girl has water. I was an object. A piece of furniture they hadn't approved. The worst part wasn't their cruelty. It was Daniel. He just sat there shrinking in his chair. He laughed too loudly at his father's bad jokes. He agreed with everything his mother said. The magnetic, confident man I fell in love with was gone. In his place was a scared little boy, desperate for their approval. In the car on the way home, the silence was heavy. They're intense, I said finally. That's just how they are, Daniel mumbled, staring out the window. They're old-fashioned. They just need to get to know you. Your mother called me the girl all night, Daniel. He flinched. She has a hard time with names. She's not good at it. I stopped at a red light. I looked at him. Really looked at him. You didn't defend me. Not once. What was I supposed to do, Riley? Start a fight? That's my family. This is how it works. You have to earn their respect. It takes time. Earn it? I said. I've done nothing to disrespect them. Just let it go, he said, please. For me, I let it go. But I didn't forget. The cracks started getting wider. A few weeks later, we were at a nice restaurant for my birthday. We had a wonderful meal. Daniel was charming again. He was the man I knew. He gave me a beautiful pair of earrings. Then the check came. Daniel reached for it, pulled out his wallet, and paused. He frowned. He patted his pockets. Uh-oh, he said, with a little nervous laugh. I must have left my main card at the office. No problem, I said. I was already pulling out my own card. I didn't care. It was just money. But as I handed the card to the waiter, I saw Daniel's face. He wasn't looking at me with gratitude. He was looking with embarrassment. He flinched. He physically recoiled just a little as if I had slapped him. He was mortified that I was paying. Later, I realized why. It wasn't because he was a traditional man who wanted to pay. It was because he was a broke man who couldn't. His entire identity was built on the illusion of wealth. My paying shattered that illusion, right in front of him. Love was real until the bills arrived. It started happening more. His card would be unexpectedly declined. He'd forget his wallet. I, being the practical one, the one who always had a backup plan, would just cover it. I was paying for our groceries. I was paying for our dinners out. I was paying for the utilities on the condo he owned. I told myself it was fine. We were a team. It would even out. But it never did. His father kept asking me what my family did, as if he hoped my answer would change. His mother kept finding new, creative ways to dismiss me. And Daniel just kept smiling his charming smile, all while letting me pay for the life he pretended was his. The signal came 2 months before the wedding. We were in the middle of planning. Or rather, I was in the middle of planning. Daniel was happy to taste cakes and pick a first dance song. But when it came to the deposits and the contracts, his eyes would glaze over. You're so good at this stuff. Riles, he'd say, kissing my forehead. You handle the details. I'll handle the romance. So I handled it. I was coordinating with the venue, the caterer, and the florist. We had a shared account we'd set up for wedding expenses. I had put in the initial $50,000. Daniel promised to match it. The match never came. My investments are tied up, he'd say. It's a bad time to pull anything out. Just cover it for now. I'm good for it. I was on a call with the florist, a woman named Maria, finalizing the centerpieces. Okay, Riley, Maria said, her voice warm. We're all set. I just need to run the deposit. We have the joint account card on file, the one ending in 4582. That's the one, I said, sipping my coffee. I heard her typing. Then, silence. She said. Her voice was suddenly awkward. Riley, the card was declined. I sat up straight. What? That's impossible. I just transferred funds in. I've run it twice. Insufficient funds. Do you have another card I could use? My face grew hot. I was embarrassed. But more than that, I was confused. I gave her my personal business card. It went through instantly. So sorry about that, I said, trying to sound casual. No problem at all, she said, too quickly. See you at the tasting. I hung up and immediately logged into the joint bank account. The $50,000 I had deposited was gone. And it wasn't just gone. There was a list of withdrawals. Small ones at first, $500 here, $1,000 there, then larger ones, $10,000, $20,000. They weren't for the wedding. They were cash withdrawals. They were transfers to a credit card I didn't recognize. My heart started to beat, slow and heavy, in my chest. I confronted Daniel that night. I kept my voice calm. Hey, I was checking the wedding account. It was empty. The florist's card was declined. He didn't even have the grace to look guilty. He looked annoyed. Oh yeah, he said, loosening his tie. I had to cover an emergency. A margin call on a stock. Don't worry about it, I'll have it back in by next week. A margin call? Daniel, that was our wedding money. It's all just money, Riley, he snapped. Why are you acting like it's the end of the world? I said I'll fix it. He had never used that tone with me before. It was cold. It was dismissive. It was his father's tone. That was the first signal. The second signal came a week later. We were at the jeweler, the one his family had supposedly used for generations to pick up our wedding bands. I had paid for my own. Daniel's was a simple, elegant platinum band. The jeweler, a slick man in a velvet jacket, smiled at us. Wonderful. Now, Mr. Harrison, we just need your father's signature on the final release form. I froze. I'm sorry, what? The jeweler's smile faltered. He looked at Daniel. Daniel laughed nervously. It's just a formality. My family account is with them. They just need to dot the I's. You need your father's signature, I said, stating it as a fact. To buy a wedding ring. It's not a big deal, Riley, he said, grabbing my arm. Let's just sign it. No, I said. I pulled out my own wallet again. Put this on my card. The whole thing. Daniel's face went white. The jeweler looked confused. Ma'am, that's not... Run the card, I said. I paid for both rings. We walked out of the store in complete silence. That was it. That was the moment the woman in love stepped back and the investor stepped forward. The part of me that built a company from scratch. The part that reads fine print. The part that trusts data, not words. That part of me took over. That night, I didn't go to sleep. I waited until Daniel was snoring, drunk on scotch he'd bought with my money. I went to my home office and I closed the door. I didn't cry. I got to work. I dug quietly. I am an investor. I know how to find information. People think money is hidden in offshore accounts and complex shells. Sometimes. But mostly, rich, lazy people hide in plain sight. They use family trusts. They use LLCs. It's all public record if you know where to look. I started with the condo, the one he owned. I ran the address through the county appraisal database. It wasn't under Daniel Harrison. It was owned by the Harrison Family Legacy Trust. I kept digging. I ran his name through corporate filings. The investment job he had at his father's firm? He wasn't a partner. He wasn't even a senior associate. He was listed as a junior portfolio manager. His salary was listed on a filing for a company loan. It was barely 6 figures. Enough to live, but not nearly enough to afford his cars, his suits, or the condo he lived in. His car? Leased. By Harrison Holdings, Inc., the glowing portfolio he'd shown me once. All the stocks he managed. I realized I had only ever seen the login screen. I never saw the name on the account. Everything he had shown me, everything he pretended was his, was borrowed. It was all his parents' fortune. He was a 36-year-old man on a very expensive allowance. He hadn't just lied. His entire life was a lie. I sat there in the dark, my laptop glowing. The man I was going to marry was a fraud. The man who said he didn't care about money was completely, hopelessly dependent on it. He didn't care about it because he had never earned a single dollar of it himself. I felt cold. The hurt was so deep it was numb. I realized I wasn't just marrying him. I was being absorbed by his family. I was being vetted as a new asset, and I, the girl who built her own fortune, was failing their test. I closed the laptop. I had all the facts. I knew what he was. I knew what his family was. Now I just had to wait for them to make the next move. I didn't have to wait long. The call came 3 days before the wedding. My phone buzzed. It was Catherine. She never called me. Riley, dear. Her voice was silky smooth, like a snake sliding over glass. Arthur and I would like to see you and Daniel this afternoon. We have some final paperwork to go over before the big day. Just a formality. There it was. That word again. Formality. I see, I said. My voice was calm. My heart felt like a stone. What time? 3 o'clock. At the house. Don't be late. She hung up. I looked at Daniel. He was sitting on our sofa playing a video game. He hadn't gotten the call. This was for me. We have to go to your parents' house, I said. He flinched. What? Why? Paperwork, I said. His face paled. He knew. He knew exactly what this was, and he hadn't warned me. He hadn't said a word. He was going to let me walk into the ambush alone. Okay, he said, turning back to his game. Yeah, okay. The drive over was silent. This time he drove his leased car. I sat in the passenger seat looking out the window, feeling nothing. I was just waiting. We walked into the same cold foyer. We were led to the same massive dining room. The marble table was empty except for a single thick stack of paper, bound in a gold-embossed leather folder. Catherine and Arthur were sitting there, side by side. They looked like royalty, ready to pass judgment. Sit down, Arthur said. He didn't say hello. Daniel and I sat on the other side of the table. He looked small. He was staring at his hands. We are very happy about this wedding, Catherine began with her lipless smile. But a union like this, it's not just a marriage. It's a merger. And the Harrison family legacy must be protected. She used her long manicured finger to slide the stack of paper across the marble. It landed in front of me with a dull, final slap. That was the hook. That was the sound from my nightmares. "This is our standard prenuptial agreement," Arthur said, his voice flat. "Our lawyers drafted it. It's non-negotiable." I opened the folder. Daniel kept his eyes on the table. I read it. I'm used to reading contracts. Most of them are dry. This was not. This was a weapon, clause after clause. It said I had no rights. Clause 4A. I would waive all rights to the shared condo, even though I had been paying the utilities and taxes for a year. It would remain solely and forever the property of the Harrison Family Trust. Clause 7C. I would have no claim on any future earnings or inheritances of Daniel's. Clause 9. A strict confidentiality agreement. I could not write about, speak about, or in any way depict the Harrison family. The penalty was $10 million. Clause 12. The worst one. In the event of infidelity by him, I would be bound to arbitration, and I would walk away with a one-time payment of $25,000. Not per year. Total. They weren't protecting their assets. They were buying me. They were putting a price tag on my silence, on my dignity. They were telling me that I was worth $25,000. I read every word. I felt the blood drain from my face, replaced by a cold, hard calm. This was not a contract. This was an execution. They were smirking. Catherine was watching me, her eyes glittering. She was waiting for me to cry, waiting for me to yell, waiting for me to prove I was the emotional, classless girl she thought I was. I took a slow, deep breath. I looked at Daniel. He finally looked up at me. His eyes were desperate. "Just sign it," he was begging me. "Don't make a scene." I turned back to his parents. "It's just a formality, dear," Catherine said, her smirk widening. I closed the leather folder. I didn't say anything. "Do you need a pen?" Arthur asked, sounding impatient. I smiled. A small, quiet smile. I pushed the folder back across the table. "No," I said. "I won't be signing this." Catherine's smile vanished. Arthur's eyes narrowed. "I beg your pardon?" Catherine said. "This is an insult," I said. My voice didn't shake. "And I don't sign insults." "Riley!" Daniel hissed, grabbing my arm. "Don't." I pulled my arm away. I stood up. "You seem to be under a serious misapprehension," I said, looking directly at Arthur and Catherine. "You think I'm marrying your son for his money. You think I'm some girl from nowhere trying to get a piece of your legacy. This is for your own good," Arthur said, his voice rising. "A girl like you needs to know her place." "My place?" I almost laughed. "My place is not here." I turned to Daniel. "You knew about this. You knew what they were doing and you let them." "Riley, please," he said, standing up. "It's just paper. It doesn't mean anything. It's for them, not for us." "It means everything," I said. I looked back at his parents. They looked stunned. They were not used to being told no. "Thank you for clarifying my position in this family," I said. I walked out of the room. I heard Daniel call my name, but I didn't stop. I got to my car. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was rage. A cold, quiet, focused rage. I sat in the driver's seat for 1 minute, just breathing. Then I picked up my phone. I didn't call my mom. I didn't call my friends. I called my attorney. "Sarah," I said, my voice perfectly level. "It's Riley Miller. Sarah is a woman so sharp she could cut through a dynasty with one clause. She handled the sale of my company. She knows my finances better than I do." "Riley," she said, 3 days to go. "Getting nervous?" "I need you to send me our standard termination package," I said. "The one we use for hostile partnerships. I also need you to draft a demand letter. I'll send you the details." There was a pause. "Who am I terminating?" Sarah asked. "My engagement," I said. Another pause. Then Sarah's voice came back, all business. "Understood. I'll have the drafts ready in an hour." "Send me everything." I hung up. They thought they had given me a prenup. They had no idea I was about to give them one of my own. They thought I was an ordinary designer from nowhere. That was the line. That was the assumption their entire plan was built on. "A girl like you," Arthur had said. He meant a girl with no name. No connections. No family money. He meant a girl who was hungry, desperate to get inside their cold marble fortress. They saw my small boutique firm. They saw my simple functional car. They saw my quiet rented house in a good but not ostentatious neighborhood. They added it all up and got 0. They were bad at math. What they didn't see, what I never showed them, was the file cabinet in my home office, the one that held the incorporation papers for Datum Design, the company I started in my garage 8 years ago with $2,000 and an idea. They didn't see the 80-hour weeks. They didn't see the years I lived on ramen noodles and cold coffee. They didn't see the payrolls I'd almost missed, or the contracts I'd fought for, or the partners who tried to cheat me. They didn't see the night I sat on my floor and cried because a server crashed, and then got up and spent the next 72 hours rebuilding it from scratch. And they definitely did not see the final acquisition paperwork from last year. A major tech conglomerate in Silicon Valley had been watching my company. They saw our user interface analytics. They saw the clean, powerful, and deeply intelligent code I had written. They made me an offer. I didn't tell Daniel the real number. I'd told him I sold some assets to fund my new investment projects. He'd nodded, smiled, and then asked me to pick up the check for dinner. The final, signed and executed offer was for $15 million. $15,000. It wasn't a family trust. It wasn't a legacy. It wasn't a leveraged asset tied to a bank. It was clean, quiet, and sitting in an investment portfolio so well managed and diversified that it was already making more money than Daniel's father's entire firm probably cleared in a year. I didn't hide it because I was ashamed. I hid it because it was a test. I'd dated men before who heard about my success. Their eyes changed. They either became competitive or they became lazy. They saw me as a rival, or they saw me as a safety net. When I met Daniel, the man who said he didn't care about money, I thought I had finally found someone who saw me. Riley, not Riley Miller. CEO, or Riley Miller, the one who sold her company. I'd wanted to be loved for who I was, not for what I had. The irony was so bitter I could taste it. He was doing the exact same thing, but in reverse. He was pretending to have money he didn't, to get his hands on the money I did. The $50,000 from the wedding account. The investment he'd be looking for later. They thought I was an ordinary designer from nowhere. They didn't know I'd sold my startup last year for $15 million. They saw me as a liability. They had no idea I was the only solvent person in that room. My call to Sarah, my lawyer, was short. "He's a fraud, Sarah," I said. "His whole family is." "I see," she said. "She's like me. She doesn't waste time on emotion. She deals in facts." "What do you need?" "I need a full asset reconciliation. I've been paying for a lot of his expenses. I want it all back. That's a civil suit. It could get messy." "I don't think it will," I said. "I think they're arrogant. And arrogant people are sloppy. I just need one more piece of evidence. One final, undeniable thing that proves this was a con." "Be careful, Riley," she said. "I'm not careful," I said, starting my car. "I'm prepared. Real power doesn't need noise. It doesn't need a marble foyer or a gold-embossed folder. It doesn't need to smirk across a table. Real power is the ability to see the truth. Real power is paperwork, and mine was perfect." I drove back to the condo. His condo. The one I'd been paying taxes on. The one that was owned by his family's trust. I felt cold. The woman who had been planning a wedding, the woman who had been choosing flower arrangements and writing vows, she was gone. She had evaporated in that dining room right when that prenup hit the table. The woman who walked back into that condo was an investor, and I was about to liquidate a very, very bad asset. That night I didn't pack. Not at first. If I started packing, he would know. He would change his story. He would become the victim. He would cry. He would apologize. He would do whatever it took to manage the situation, to manage me. I had to be smarter than that. I had to be silent. I went into the kitchen. I made a cup of tea just like I did every night. My hands were perfectly steady. I looked at the counter, at the knife block, the fruit bowl, the sleek stainless steel espresso machine I had bought for us as an early wedding present. I took my phone. I opened the voice memos app. It was simple. I propped the phone up, leaning it against the fruit bowl, the microphone facing the room. I hit record. The little red numbers started to climb. I left it there, a silent witness. Then I went into our bedroom and I sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't turn on the main light. I just sat in the dim glow of the city outside. I waited. It's a terrible feeling, waiting to have your heart broken on purpose. It was almost 11 p.m. when I heard his key in the door. I heard him come in. He threw his keys into the ceramic bowl on the hall table. A hard, clattering sound. "Riley?" he called out. His voice was thick. I didn't answer. I heard him walk into the kitchen. I heard the refrigerator open, the clink of ice cubes in a glass, the heavy glug of a bottle being poured. He was pouring himself a drink. Scotch. His father's drink. I heard him sigh. Then I heard him dial his phone. I stayed perfectly still. I didn't even breathe. His voice cut through the apartment. "Mother? It's me." A pause. "It was a disaster," he said, and his voice was a low, angry slur. She completely freaked out. She walked out. Another pause. He was listening. No, I didn't. I didn't let her. What was I supposed to do? Tackle her? He laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. "Don't worry. She'll be back. Where is she going to go? She'll sign. She's not stupid enough to walk away from this. She just needed to be dramatic. She'll cool off. She'll sign." My blood went cold. Not stupid enough to walk away. He really believed it. He really thought I was that desperate, that worthless. "I'll handle it," he said. "Just tell Dad I'll handle it." He hung up. I heard him set the glass down hard on the counter. Silence. My phone was still recording. Then, I heard the ding of a text message coming through on his phone. I heard him pick up his phone. A few seconds later, he was dialing again, but his voice was different this time. It wasn't the voice of the scared son. It was low. It was intimate. It was a voice I recognized. It was the voice he used with me late at night. "Hey," he said softly. "Yeah, I'm home." It was a total mess, a pause, I know. I know, my parents they laid it on way too thick. They scared her. "It's fine. I'll fix it." Another, longer pause. "No, don't worry about that. She's just a bridge, baby." That's all. And we're almost at the other side. As soon as this is done, and as soon as she moves her main investment funds into our joint account, you and I will be on that beach in Belize, just like we planned. My breath caught in my throat. A bridge, then I heard it. A woman's voice on the other end. It was faint, but the phone's microphone picked it up. It wasn't his mother's. "And the money?" the woman's voice asked. "The money from her company?" "It's coming," Daniel slurred. "She trusts me. She'll sign anything I put in front of her. Don't worry. I told you, I have this under control. I'll see you tomorrow." He hung up. Silence. I heard his footsteps. He didn't come to our bedroom. He went to the guest room. The door clicked shut. I sat in the dark for 10 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I felt hollow. The man I loved didn't exist. He was a performance. And the show was over. It wasn't just his family. It was him. He wasn't a weak man caught in his parents' world. He was a con artist. He was using me. He was using her. The prenup wasn't just to protect his family. It was to trap my money so he could leave with his mistress. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I walked. I went to the kitchen. The phone was still recording. The screen was dark. I stopped the recording. I saved the file. I immediately airdropped it to my laptop and my secure cloud server. Then I deleted the original from my phone. I had the proof. Silence is a powerful witness. I had just enough proof to end them quietly. And to end them completely. I went into the bedroom, but not to sleep. I opened my laptop. I sent the audio file to Sarah, my lawyer. Her reply came back in less than 5 minutes. "Oh, Riley, I am so sorry. But we've got them. We've got them cold. I'll have the termination contract and the demand letter ready by 8 a.m. How do you want to handle this?" I looked at the guest room door. I typed back. "I'll handle it in person. At their house. Tomorrow." The next morning, I texted Daniel. "I've had time to think. I'm willing to discuss the prenup. I'll be at your parents' house at 10 a.m. Please make sure they are both there." His reply was almost instant. "Of course. See you then. I love you." I almost threw the phone. "I love you." The words were just tools to him. I dressed carefully. I didn't wear a power suit. I didn't wear a revenge dress. I wore simple dark slacks and a white silk blouse. I looked professional. I looked calm. I looked like me. I drove to the estate, my car. I felt nothing as the iron gates opened. They were all waiting for me in the same room. The marble dining room. Arthur and Catherine were at the head of the table, sitting side by side. They looked smug. They looked victorious. They thought they had won. They thought the little girl from nowhere had come to her senses. Daniel stood up when I walked in. He rushed over, his face a mask of concern. "Riley, baby, I'm so glad you—" I put my hand up. "Don't. Sit down, Daniel." His smile faded. He looked confused. He went and sat next to his parents, like a child. I met them at their estate, same marble table. This time I didn't sit. I stood at the opposite end of the table. I placed my leather briefcase on the marble surface. It made a soft, solid sound. "Thank you for meeting me," I said. My voice was clear. It didn't echo, but it filled the room. "Of course, dear," Catherine said, her smile like a thin crack in ice. "We knew you'd see reason. Did you bring the signed papers?" "I did not," I said. I opened my briefcase. I took out a small, plain black USB drive. I slid it across the table. It was so small, it looked ridiculous on the massive, empty expanse of polished stone. "What's this?" Arthur said, annoyed. "A toy. You wanted a prenup," I said. "You are very focused on contracts and proof. I thought you should listen to what your son's been signing up for." Arthur frowned. He looked at Daniel, who had gone completely white. "Daniel?" Arthur said. "What is this?" "It's just an audio file," I said. "You might want to play it." Catherine scoffed. But Arthur motioned to a laptop on a side table. He plugged in the drive. I didn't have to tell him which file to play. There was only one. I hit play. The room filled with Daniel's voice. "Don't worry. She'll sign. She's not stupid enough to walk away from this." I watched Catherine. Her hand, which was reaching for a water glass, froze. Her smile vanished. She looked at Daniel. Then, the second part of the recording played. The intimate part. "Hey," Daniel's voice said, soft and low. "She's just a bridge, baby. That's all." And we're almost at the other side. Arthur's face, which had been smug, slowly turned a dark, blotchy red. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at his son with a look of pure, cold fury. Then, the woman's voice. "And the money? The money from her company?" "It's coming," Daniel's voice slurred. "She trusts me." Arthur slammed the laptop shut. The silence in the room was violent. Their smiles collapsed. Catherine looked like she had been slapped. Arthur looked like he was about to have a heart attack. And Daniel just sat there staring at the table, his entire life crumbling in front of him. "So," I said, my voice cutting through the silence, "that's the man you wanted me to sign a contract with. A man who was actively conning me, and you. He was planning to take my money and run. With her." "Who?" Catherine whispered. "Who is she?" "I don't care," I said. "That's his problem. This is mine." I reached into my briefcase again. I pulled out a new folder. Not a gold-embossed one. A simple professional manila folder. I slid it across the table. It landed in front of Arthur. "You wanted a contract," I said. "Here's mine." He opened it. "That is a termination of engagement agreement," I explained. "It dissolves our partnership." But that's not the important part. The second document is, "What is this?" Arthur growled. "That is a demand for reimbursement," with receipts attached. "All legal, all final." I listed the charges. First, the $50,000 from the joint wedding account that Daniel emptied for a margin call. Second, the $18,500 in non-refundable deposits for the venue, the caterer, and the florist, which I paid from my personal account. Third, the $14,200 in property taxes and utilities I have paid on this family's condo for the past 12 months. Fourth, the $24,000 for the wedding bands I paid for. I paused. And finally, I said, my voice like steel, the $75,000 investment I made in Daniel's new fund 2 months ago. The fund he was planning to use to run away with his mistress. The total was just over $180,000. "There is a wire transfer number on the last page," I said. "You have 24 hours to deposit the full amount. If that money is not in my account by 10 a.m. tomorrow, the USB drive, which contains several other very interesting recordings, goes to every reporter, every business journal, and every board member you've ever had lunch with." Arthur looked up at me. His eyes were burning. He hated me. He hated me because I had beaten him. "You are?" he started. "I am what?" I asked. "A girl from nowhere? An ordinary designer?" I turned and looked at Daniel. He was crying. Silent, pathetic tears. "You're not a charming man, Daniel," I said. "You're just a hollow man. You're a ghost. You have nothing. You are nothing." I closed my briefcase. My lawyer has copies of everything. 10 a.m. tomorrow. I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't run, I walked. My heels clicked on their cold marble floor, a final rhythmic sound. This time, no one called my name. The next morning, I woke up in my own house. My real house. I made coffee. I sat on my quiet patio listening to the birds. At 9:52 a.m., my phone pinged. It was a notification from my bank. A wire transfer had been received. The full amount. Down to the last cent, they had paid. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted good. I didn't leak the USB drive. I didn't have to. I had a feeling the Harrisons would destroy themselves far more efficiently than I ever could. I was right. 2 days later, the headlines started. I hadn't leaked the audio of the affair. That was too messy. That was personal. My lawyer simply gave a no-comment statement to a financial reporter who was asking why the Harrison-Miller wedding was suddenly off. But the prenup was business. An anonymous source, maybe a stunned associate at the Harrisons' law firm, maybe a caterer who had to be canceled, leaked the story. The headline in the Austin Business Journal was brutal. Entrepreneur Riley Miller walks out on millionaire's son after exposing hostile prenup plot. The story was devastating. It didn't paint me as a victim. It painted me as a savvy businesswoman who had uncovered a bad faith deal. It painted the Harrisons as what they were, ruthless, old-money bullies who had tried to trap a successful, self-made woman. In their world, being called ruthless was one thing. Being called tacky was another. The fall was fast. It wasn't loud. It was a series of quiet, heavy doors slamming shut. Their law firm clients, many of them self-made tech entrepreneurs like me, started calling. They didn't like the smell of old-world traps. They wanted statements. Arthur's legacy was built on an image of family, stability, and trust. Who could trust a man who treated his future daughter-in-law like a corporate raider? 2 of the charity boards he sat on quietly accepted his resignation. A major bank he was partnered with postponed their upcoming joint venture, citing a review of internal ethics. His world was built on reputation, and that reputation was now in ashes. And Daniel? His fall was the most pathetic of all. Daniel's brand new image of wealth was now just a hollow press photo. The fund he was trying to start? It evaporated. His name was mud. No one in Austin would invest with a man who had been so thoroughly exposed as a fraud. And a fool. I heard through a friend that his mistress, the woman in Belize, had disappeared the day the story broke. She, like everyone else, had realized the Harrison well was dry. He wasn't a catch. He was just the bait on his father's hook. I stayed silent. I didn't have to post on social media. I didn't have to give a tell-all interview. I didn't need revenge posts. The truth was loud enough. I went back to work. I met with my real partners. I analyzed new investments. I started sketching out the idea for a new company. The Harrisons and their drama. They were already a line item in my past. A bad investment I had successfully divested from. A lesson learned. They had tried to make me a footnote in their legacy. Instead, they had become a cautionary tale in mine. On the day I was supposed to say I do, I was 10,000 miles away. There was no white gown. There was no cold church. There were no fake smiles. I sat on a small, quiet beach in Capri, Italy. I had my toes buried in the warm, dark sand. The sun was a fiery orange, melting slowly into the deep blue of the Tyrrhenian Sea. I had booked the ticket 2 days after the wire transfer came through. It was my honeymoon, the one